Hi everyone and welcome back. Welcome to my another small course. This is a small 5 hours course I'm going to create that is for building Airbnb clone. So I was thinking about, okay, I'm creating a full stack clone application that takes like hours to complete, like 20 or 30 hours. So I'm going to create a mini course which talks about only a simple Airbnb clone implementation with the help of the latest tech stack. So what we are going to use, Next.js 13.x, and here we are going to use React.js 18.x, and here Prisma, which is a ORM solution, which we can just pair up with our Next.js. So you can just use Prisma at the Next.js server side at the APIs, and we can use NextAuth to build a simple authentication, like I want to do a login with a Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, that we can implement using this NextAuth. You just need to provide a simple implementation for that. I mean, you just need to create a simple client IDs and pass that client ID to the NextAuth. So these are the two things which we are already like solved. NextAuth will do the authentication. We will create some components using React in the Next.js, like API page, server side pages and the client side pages that will show us the data. And once you logged in, you have the token, you will start accessing, because we are talking about Next.js and we are using NextAuth. So we already know how to capture the session in the client side components. If the session exists, you can trigger an API calls to the Next.js APIs. We are not going to build our API services, so we are not going to build enterprise microservices and all. You can just make a simple API calls to our simple Next.js server side components, server side APIs, those APIs, because in the Next.js you can build a server side APIs, right? And those APIs will be talking to the Prisma client. Through the Prisma client, you will be able to access the data from the Prisma, which is accessing the data from the database. Prisma is just like a ORM. So here we are also going to have some database, let's say Postgres or MySQL, whatever. And this ORM is going to give us the data like this. So what we are doing is, first you are logged in, right? Using NextAuth, your session exists. Now you can start fetching the data or start making API calls to fetch the protected data about the user session, user data and all. On landing page, I wanted to show you all the Airbnb options for your stay. That will be the public endpoint, and that we can fetch from the API side. So there will be a Next.js API endpoints that is going to fetch us the data from the Postgres database. And we are going to define the Prisma schema, which contains all the different tables, and we are using NextAuth, and we are going to use these different providers, login with the Google, Facebook, GitHub and all. So accordingly, the data coming from the Google Auth and Facebook and all will be synchronized in the Postgres also, because NextAuth will ask you how you want to persist your authentication data, like the user data. So we will be using a simple Postgres database for it. Postgres will store the data, and then we should be able to do the simple session management using Next.js components. So once the session exists, you will start doing the bookings and simple implementation. So all those APIs using Next.js APIs, we will be using just a Prisma client, because this is really nice. You can just use a Prisma client and access your database tables. You don't need external microservices managing the users and all, because I want to make this a small project, not like a big bang microservices project, a small project which contains everything inside a single repository. It will be using Prisma, NextAuth, and React.js and Next.js and the Postgres. These are the simple stack, and we will be using a social authentication. Once the session exists, session created in the Next.js components, you will start looking into different pages, and you will start doing the orders and all. And for all these components, we will start making the API calls in the Next.js API routes, which indirectly will update, delete, create data in the database using Prisma client. Okay, it's going to be fun. So this is the NextAuth. Here you can use the different adapters, different providers. Let's say I want to use Auth0. I will be creating my provider something like this, or you want to log in with Facebook, Twitter and all, like I want to log in with a GitHub. So this is how you will do. We will be using GitHub provider and passing the GitHub ID and GitHub secret. Similarly, there are adapters. So these are the providers which are available. And this is about NextAuth. How we are doing it, we are going to integrate NextAuth for our Next.js application. Like if you see the getting started with PNPM, you add it and you add this simple API routes in the Next.js API routes, right? You can see this API route name inside API auth nextauth.js, and nextauth.js looks like this. You will be passing all the providers you are using, GitHub provider, Google provider and all, and then at the client components, because you will be using the Next.js pages, this is how you will initialize the session at the root level. So all the components should be able to access the session object, right? This is how you will use session hook to get the session data. If session exists, I can show your email, otherwise you will have a sign in button. And in the backend, like these are the restricted APIs. You can access only those if the session exists. So we can get, because this is API route, pages API. So here we are getting, okay, server side session exists, yes, then I will allow you to access, otherwise you cannot access the content. Okay, so we will be playing with these providers, managing the session, using the GitHub login and all. So it's going to be fun. We are using TypeScript. Prisma is like an ORM, which will give us we just need to create a Prisma schema file, and then Prisma generate, Prisma migrate. That is going to create us the migration files and the database tables. We just need to write this schema file. So it's going to be fun. And we are all obviously using React 18 with the Next.js. So we will be creating a components, and finally Tailwind for our component design. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a small course which contains a few hours, but it's going to be a fun ride doing all these things together. On another side, I'm also covering T3 stack, which is also using TRPC. So these two playlists, I will say, is going to be a small and going to be a fun, because we are learning all these modern stack. And if you want to build if you want to just play around and build something really nice, then these are the tools which you can use to build something nicer and quicker. Okay, let's deep dive in and just baseline our project with all these different stuff: Prisma, Tailwind, Next.js, NextAuth, integrate all these things together and baseline our project. So see you in the next video with more content on this subject.